Hey everyone, this is Nick, and this week again my confidence in free and open source software has been a little bit shaken. Because not only do we have a concerning blog post from the developer of Core.js, a very well used library for web development, also used by giant tech companies, and that still cannot get enough funding to keep operations going. We also have Mycroft shutting down operations and leaving their backers without the devices that they paid for. Now fortunately, we also have some good news with Thunderbird's new redesign showing up more of what it's going to bring to the new version, and KDE Plasma 5.27 being the biggest release KDE has ever seen, probably in the Plasma 5 cycle entirely. And if you want some more good news, why not listen to this segue to today's sponsor? This video is sponsored by Squarespace, and if you're looking to start an online business or just create your own personal website, it's going to be your one-stop shop for everything you need. Not only can you create a website of any kind super quickly by using any of their templates and adjusting the colors or the layout graphically, but you can also enrich what you created with tons of modules. You can add a video gallery, a paid membership space, or even an online store complete with online payments, even if you know nothing about building a website. And Squarespace can also help you with the domain name you'll need for people to access your website or for creating your logo. So head over to squarespace.com/thelinuxexperiment or just click the link in the description and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. In a pretty depressing blog post, the developer of Core.js explained how funding in open source is broken. Core.js is one of the most popular libraries for web development, implementing JavaScript support for the latest ECMA script standards, as well as some ancient features. It's what we call a polyfill library that provides modern features to older browsers that don't natively support them. It has 9 billion total downloads on NPM and around 250 million downloads per month still, and is listed as a dependency by 19 million GitHub repositories, and it's used by some of the biggest companies out there like PayPal, eBay, Apple, Netflix, or LinkedIn. And still, the developer cannot get enough funding to justify working on that project. In the blog post, the developer goes over how the development started and the general goal of improving web compatibility for everyone. They also go over some personal life events that contributed to making development difficult. The core of the issue is that getting funding for open source libraries is extremely complicated. Asking messages during install, asking for user contributions, generated hate messages, and the introduction of npm fund also disabled messages asking for contributions after install, which meant the backer numbers slowly declined. At this point, the developer earns 4 or 5 times less from Core.js than they could by taking full-time development contracts for companies, making it difficult to sustain development of the library. Current monthly revenue seems to be at around $1,700, which is definitely on the low side for a full-time dev gig, depending on where you live. And since the developer lives in Russia, they've been affected by the recent sanctions that meant a lot of platforms simply could not send him the money he was owed, further reducing the revenue. The developer ends the post by laying out a few options. Either they can get appropriate funding, and they'll keep working on the library, or they'll have to turn the library into a commercial project with all the licensing issues that this could create, or they will just stop working on Core.js altogether. And the core of that story isn't about Core.js really, it's about FOSS funding and how our current model for developers to get paid for their work is fundamentally broken. Because when you have such a successful development library or such a successful product, and it's used by giant tech companies, but you still cannot make ends meet working on that, then something truly doesn't work. And it's not just an issue of, oh, the poor developer cannot make ends meet, because that's an issue, but that's not the main issue. The main issue is such a widely used library, if it's not appropriately funded, is also not appropriately maintained, which means that the backbone of the web runs on stuff that is basically not secure or not as secure as it could be. Now, some less depressing news as Thunderbird's communication efforts continue, and the excellent Jason Evangelo shared a preview of what you can expect in the mail module of the future version, version 1.15. They're redesigning the folder panel that lists your mail accounts and local folders, and I must say, it looks pretty damn good. There's more space between items, so things are more legible, but they also kept the current mode, with more information density if that's what you prefer. It seems to be their main goal here, modernizing the user interface for newcomers, but letting Thunderbird veterans keep the interface they're already used to. They're also working on a new header for that panel, with an affectionately named meatball menu, as in 3 dots, that gets you various options to display or hide information, and a refresh button that just lets you pull in new mail. And there's also a big new message button that is way more visible and easier to click. Thunderbird will also let users turn local folders off if they don't need that, and they can also use tags to sort messages without resorting to folder triage. Tags will be visible in the folder panel as they relate to organization, and they can be used just like you would use traditional folders. And I really like the direction Thunderbird is headed. It's colorful, it's modern, and it retains all the features that people are used to, while making newcomers, like me basically, more familiar with a more simple and accessible interface. If the rest of the redesign is along those lines, I will definitely use it. KDE Plasma 5.27 was released this week, the last version in the KDE 5 series, and the team is now working on Plasma 6 with all sorts of bigger improvements to the desktop. But in the meantime, 5.27 is probably the biggest release of KDE in the past years, bringing with it a new tiling system that lets you create tiles and seamlessly move your windows to them and adjust them on the fly. It's a nice addition to the already existing screen edge tiling features. Multi-monitor support has been completely revamped and should result in a lot more stable experience, where your panels, widgets and desktop icons don't jump around all the time when you're disconnecting and reconnecting to external monitors. Discover was made way more useful with more information and a new homepage to showcase some applications. KRunner got a big logic update that should surface more relevant results first, and most, if not all, widgets have been improved, from their tooltips, middle-click actions, presentation, or features. There's also a new Plasma Welcome app that presents some of KDE's advanced features in a nice user-friendly way, which should fix one of the main issues I had with KDE for newcomers, which was that it doesn't let users know about all the power it has under the hood. And of course, there's the usual slew of settings changes, with some settings being incorporated into existing pages to streamline things, new pages added for touchscreens and Flatpak permissions, or new settings to let you configure how your pen for your drawing tablet works. Wayland sessions also now support true fractional scaling and global shortcuts, which means it's basically up to date with what the Wayland protocol currently implements. It is a wonderful new version, and I have a complete video about it if you haven't already watched it. It's linked in the description or in the card up top. I briefly reported on Mycroft's demise last week in the audio podcast version of these news videos. You can find a link to that in the description. And there are some news on that front this week as well. Unfortunately, it looks like the company building the open source and private voice assistant will indeed have to stop operations and won't be able to fulfill their orders made on their Kickstarter campaign. They gave a little bit more background around why this is happening, and basically it boils down to the fact that they offered the Mycroft Mark II in a crowdfunding campaign, which is dedicated pre-built hardware to run the assistant. And since they had to lay off most of the staff, they also could not find a reliable hardware partner to provide the Mark II at a reasonable price point, after the first partner that they had could not manage to make the hardware stable enough. They decided to make the devices using off-the-shelf components then, but the increase in prices and supply chain issues that everyone experienced these past years, well, with all of that, the cost rose from $99 to $300. So they still managed to keep producing these devices to get them certified and to start shipping, but ultimately these cost increases and an unnamed patent troll that attacked them and cost them a lot of money in litigation basically put an end to everything. Now, all of these things meant that they also had no money to devote to improving the software, and so the Mark II launched with an underwhelming set of features, which in turn meant little in the way of press coverage and good reviews, so fewer sales, and not enough money to cover the rest of operations. So orders made through the website will apparently still be honored, those that paid full price, but the Kickstarter backer rewards won't be sent and operations will unfortunately cease. It looks like multiple factors compounded to make Mycroft unable to continue operations, but it's always sad to see backers that believed in the project and helped it lift it off the ground not being able to receive their stuff while people who buy it now will. I think it's a bit unfair, but I can understand why they're doing it. Now, on the GNOME side this week, the developers have really showcased a lot of cool things that I hope will make it in time for GNOME 44 next month. First, there's the ability to generate a QR code straight from the Wi-Fi panel, so you can easily connect other devices to the same network without entering a hopefully long and secure password. The mouse and touchpad settings panel now has animations to represent certain preferences like the natural scrolling. And GNOME Shell's quick settings should now be much better, with the Bluetooth toggle now listing devices you can connect to through a submenu, all toggles getting a main title and a subtitle to give you more information, and a new background apps section that shows what is running in the background without a window and should maybe be a replacement for tray icons. libadwaita also got better avatars when scaling an image down, they will be less blurry. GNOME Console got a tab overview screen that you can invoke with Shift plus Control plus O. Weather now has a flat header bar and a smoother curve for temperatures. Contacts now has the ability to share contacts with a QR code, and you can now remove birthdays from them if you want. And GNOME Web got a new UI to handle permissions, like notifications, saving logins, or accessing the mic and camera. It is really cool to see the GNOME team showcasing their work on GNOME Shell and the GNOME Core apps in these weekly blog posts. They usually mostly talk about third-party apps, so I hope that this trend of showcasing the core work also continues to be more along the lines of what KDE does in their weekly blog posts. Canonical introduced Real-Time Ubuntu, a version of their distribution that uses the real-time Linux kernel. A real-time kernel is meant to reduce latency to ensure tasks are performed at predictable timings by guaranteeing that they are performed under a certain number of microseconds. The goal here is to have an offering for specific sectors, such as industrial work, telecommunications, automotive, aerospace, and defense. Real-Time Ubuntu uses the Linux kernel 5.15 with the preempt RT patch sets that allow this latency reduction for the x86 and ARM architectures. To access this specific version of Ubuntu, you will need an Ubuntu Pro subscription, and it is available for most Ubuntu variants, although Real-Time Ubuntu will not be compatible with the live patching system Canonical also offers to reduce server downtime by applying patches to the kernel without rebooting. It's also not compatible with NVIDIA proprietary drivers, which might limit its use in scenarios where OpenCL or CUDA are needed. It is meant more for servers, of course, whether it's the regular Ubuntu server versions or the Ubuntu Core variant designed for smaller footprints, and it's only available for LTS releases. Now, what's really interesting to me here is that Canonical seems to be waking up and offering many different commercial solutions, like Ubuntu Pro and now this new Real-Time Ubuntu for multiple other sectors. And I think that's because their IPO might be coming up. They already talked about going public about a year ago, and it should be about time that they do it. So probably they hope that by having a large panel of commercial offerings and services, their IPO will go smoother. And let's wrap this up with the gaming news. First, Lutris got a new update, version 0.5.13, and they now support Proton, which should make game compatibility rise a bit. They also restyled the configuration, preferences, installer and add games windows, so they should be more legible. They grouped configuration options into sections. They can now create 32-bit prefixes for games that require it. They added a workaround for Humble Bundle authentication, but more importantly, they added integrations with itch.io and Battle.net. It's a pretty big release, and with the addition of the game integration for Battle.net, I think it means that they basically can show all your libraries from every single third-party Windows launcher in just one app, which is really cool. The long list of compatibility tools for Linux gaming continues to grow with D8 VK, the same thing as the X VK, but for DirectX 8 games. It's still in development, but it's moving forward, and it already supports a bunch of titles, like Age of Mythology, Arma Cold War Assault, Deus Ex Invisible War, Freelancer, GTA 3 and Vice City, Max Payne, Silent Hill 2 and 3, or Morrowind. Some of these games were already playable on Linux with our current tools, but a dedicated compatibility library means that the quirks of these older DirectX versions will be handled better and should result in better performance. And there's also more work on the shader cache for Steam. This thing is meant to let you download pre-built shaders for your games, so there's less time wasted in-game waiting for the shaders to compile. But the issue is, a lot of people seem to have to re-download the entire thing every time that they're updated, instead of just downloading the parts that changed. Valve looked into it and found a server-side issue that should reduce the size of these downloads, which is always good for metered connection or just for wait times in general. From shaders to Proton to Wine to D8VK and other compatibility things, it kinda looks like Linux is going to be a more comfortable experience than Windows to play games that are either AAA or way older. I think that nowadays Linux is kinda more backwards compatible with older Windows games than Windows is itself, which is actually kind of insane if you think about it. Just like you would be insane to not listen to this segue to our sponsor. If your current computer is due for a replacement and you want to install Linux on it, stop looking at Windows devices and hoping that they might be compatible. Buy something that supports Linux out of the box from today's sponsor, Tuxedo. They're based in Germany, but they ship worldwide and they have a huge range of devices that should honestly cover every price point and every need. And all of their devices are very customizable with tons of options for the CPU, the GPU, the SSD, the RAM. You can even have your own keyboard layout laser etched on the keys of your laptop, or your own logo laser etched on your device, or no logo at all. And all their laptops are upgradable, repairable for the SSD, the RAM, and the battery. And they basically have everything you might want. So stop looking at Windows computers. Look at the link in the description below and get yourself something from Tuxedo. So thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you didn't like the video, well, you can also dislike it and tell me why in the comments as well. All these news videos are also in audio podcast form in the link in the description below with more topics and more coverage. And if you really enjoy what I do, well, you know what to do. All the links to support the channel are in the description below as well. So, thanks everyone for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!